I'm Janelle, for anyone who doesn't know me, and I'm the co-founder of Your Architecture, City Planning, and Foresight. And what we do at Your 2040 right now is really focusing on and looking at regenerative placemaking. And so John will go into kind of his version of regeneration, and I think mine and ours aligns a lot. And then placemaking, which is kind of the places and spaces that we all live and cohabitate on Earth. Just some maybe logistics before we get started. The agenda for tonight, shortly, we'll show videos soon and then hand it over to John, who's going to talk to you about regenerative triangulation. And then we'll have time for Q&A with him, and then a bit of a workshop engagement virtual session altogether. And then we will wrap up and let you go on the hour to do whatever you're doing in whatever part of the world you're in. So I think for me right now, this is really fun because we've got a lot of more time zones than usual. So it's very cool. Yeah, and I think without maybe further ado, because we have a bunch of new people, I'm going to show you a little video on kind of what is 2040 and what we do at Your 2040. It's about a minute and a half, so it will be fun and engaging, hopefully, for you all.
Hey you, come closer. Imagine being part of a community that's changing the world. That is Your 2040. But what is Your 2040 exactly? We are a growing group of over 1,900 creators, decision makers, and forward thinkers. We are artists, scientists, policymakers, consultants, entrepreneurs, and change makers. We are as diverse as the life on Earth itself. Every year we meet for 3 days. Today, we are here, in La Punt. Our goal? To be the best ancestors we can be. We believe in a positive future, which is renewable in every way, where people, place, and nature live in harmony, where abundance is the norm. At Your 2040, we develop creative solutions and kickstart projects that drive our mission forward. Together, we inspire each other to accelerate change. Join us and participate in shaping a better future. Become part of our vision and see how your support can make a global impact.
A little video always makes me excited. I love the music and the energy in it. So hopefully it made you excited too. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to John and leave him with a question to start with, which is, and while he's chatting, feel free to leave your questions in the chat. We'll have time to kind of talk with him afterwards. But I think, John, the big question is, who are you and what do you do?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So my name's John. I'm going to share my slides quickly because as a sort of there's a slide in here that is the sort of like the place where I go, this is what I do. So let's do that. We met, Janelle and Chris got in touch about talking at Your 2040 about various things just based on regeneration. And I wanted to go a little deeper into that for this session. So to talk about where this came from, what do I think now, and what next. I was kind of like, I was doing that thing where I'm kind of like sitting squirming in my chair when Janelle goes, oh, yeah, expertise in regeneration. And I'm like, no, well, I'm really interested in the word. Let's not go into kind of like expertise as a sort of like a defined characteristic yet. My journey towards this is I've run Smithery, which is our studio. Myself, my wife Helen, we run little teams occasionally on projects. Set up in 2011 with this idea of sort of, it's better to make things people want rather than make people want things. So I was previously Chief Innovation Officer at a media agency, and I was just conscious that all of the things that clients wanted to sell with innovation were not all of the things that perhaps um, the world needed, we wanted, they should be doing, people wanted them to do, and so on. Not necessarily a kind of like an environmental or a regenerative start point, but definitely a sort of like, we're in the 21st century and something needs to change. What might that be? So, oh, one of the more recent projects that I was working on was for UNDP. So we did this from 2022 to 2023, and we helped them build a future trends and signal system, which is really a social practice and a kind of like technological system underneath. The byproduct of which was working with so many people in different countries and different continents who are close to so many different impacts of mankind, environment, economics, social things, made me go, we should start doing something. So it was like staring into the untempered schism and going, I'm kind of sort of like, I want to find ways to apply ourselves to the work that needs doing in a more productive way. And it was at that time in 2023, so fairly recently, I bumped into the word regenerative, and always within the kind of like the construct of people going, we need to move beyond sustainability towards to become regenerative, go beyond sustainability to become regenerative, which is, and I pay attention to language quite a lot. This is both a spatial and a temporal metaphor, but implies that you have to do one before the other. So you have to go from unsustainable to sustainable and then become regenerative. It implies through, we have to move through this state of something to get to this other place. But the way I felt and thought about it, it made me think of Taleb's anti-fragile idea, going, well, the true opposite to fragile is not robust. Robust is just creating the conditions where you will not break this formulation, this system that you have under the threat it's under. The true opposite to fragility is anti-fragile, something that grows from those conditions rather than breaks. And I started thinking that, well, actually, sustainable is in one direction of unsustainable. It's essentially, I've got the shape of my organization, my economy, my industry, and I just want to make that more sustainable. I don't really want to change it. I just want to keep it in the same shape. Whereas regenerative is kind of like, well, under those same conditions, how might it grow? How might it be bigger? How might it be something different? These feel like they're in different directions. So I started thinking of this as sort of like, this is just tinkering, and especially like since then, in reading back the kind of like the original aims of sustainability and where it is now, it does feel like very numbers-based tinkering, whereas moving to become regenerative from being unsustainable feels a lot more transformative. Oh, sorry, every time somebody comes in the room, I have to sort of like move my mouse back. There's also something recently that I picked up in the last year or so where Um, there's a great word which is like the opposite of entrepreneurial. So entrepreneurial is a word that, as someone from an innovation background, we're always talking about how do we become more innovative? Entrepreneurial, sort of like working inside the organization to fix things. There's a professor at Yale called Teresa Chahine who talks about extrapreneurial, who talks about sort of like actually there's sort of like to become regenerative, we have to start thinking bigger, think outside the walls of the organization or the country or the community that you're in, and going, who else is aligned into these goals? Who else is wanting to poke and prod and really change how this works? So it's looking outside, sort of like we start getting into a sort of like a much different creation of sort of like starting from here, what might that become? So as I was thinking about all of these thoughts, I thought, okay, how do you start framing these choices? And I looked at these two models, which some of you might be familiar with, um, and just thought I do this quite a lot. I steal things and break things apart and put them together in new ways just to see what happens. So I thought I'll take one axis from one and one axis from the other and see how this starts framing that the difference between sustainability and regenerative activities. So I borrowed this axis from the conventional practice up to the regenerative. So conventional practice, green, sustainable, to restorative, to reconciliatory, up to regenerative. And I thought, okay, that's quite interesting. This is sort of like the sustainability sits below the line, where we're only really concerned and considered with the impact our action is having. Whereas above the line, we start thinking bigger. We start going, okay, what is the impact we're having on action? If we're trying to sort of like turn ourselves into something that is regenerative, what does that look like above the line? Then by throwing the impact over time of the three horizons into there, you start saying, well, in horizon one, what are we doing today? In third horizon, what do we want to become? And in the second horizon, what might we need to do to get there? And just when I started plotting these things out, and this was basically a little bit of work just reading around over a summer and writing a blog post, I was like, well, if you don't change anything and you're unsustainable, so imagine you start. My feeling when I made the model, and still partly now, is kind of like you start here at zero, because like we are where we are and we can do what we can. But if you do nothing, you just incur all of the impacts you were always going to do, and you get to 100% of negative impact by the end of each one. So if you start tomorrow and do nothing, you start today, do nothing tomorrow, nothing the next day, by the end of that horizon, you've just incurred all of the costs and the damage that you were going to. Rule one of the unsustainable trajectory is like, don't get worse, right? Don't try and go below that line. But I seriously don't imagine many people are today. So when we start plotting out the current initiatives that a lot of people are doing, a lot of these will be geared into the sustainability area. So we go by horizon two. If we start gathering together all the things that we're actually planning to do, we get to this sustainability by horizon two, which is better than the unsustainable trajectory, obviously, but it's still not as ambitious as we should be. So if you can imagine ambitious futures and go, what would regenerative actually look like for horizon three? Like if we sort of ignore all of the things that we're doing at the moment, etc., what would you really trying to be aiming for? What would it look like to be socially, environmentally, and economically regenerative as an organization? You suddenly get to a place where you're going, right, I can see the two different directions that we could take. They can feel different depending on the context, but there's something here that asks us two important questions. The first question is, does becoming sustainable first help us become regenerative? So this goes back to the original kind of like feeling of going sort of like, and I think it's all context dependent. So, for instance, business A, if becoming sustainable takes that long and you go all the way down there and you go, well, that's a long way to get to where we want to become regenerative, compared to business B, who go, well, actually, a lot of our sustainable actions are taking us close to that line and they're quite soon. Maybe we can use that an accelerant. But again, it becomes all of this feels to me like to be context dependent. So we're going like, okay, so let's find the real evidence on the ground of sort of like how it would work. The second question, though, is what might we do today to get there more quickly? So that's where you sort of like start coming here and going, well, what if we were aiming for that? What would come before that? So it's simple backcasting. What would come before that? What would come before that? What are the first actions we would take in this horizon? And suddenly you get to this point of comparison between the two. You say, like, let's look at the things we're doing today. Let's look at the things that we would be doing in this alternative universe where we're going towards regenerative, and just work out how we switch them. And just work out how we start making sort of like as many small commitments to be above that line rather than below that line, and see that happens. And of course, it's like, as with any futures or foresight work, we can't predict and we don't predict and we shouldn't predict the future. What you're trying to do is you're trying to help decision making now, so that people have got a sense of, we should be moving in this direction rather than just sort of like continuing that path. As I said, that was a blog post. My journey to here to Janelle going regenerative expertise is nothing of the sort, but it's essentially 2 years ago in June, I wrote a blog post. Lizzie said, you've now got to do a talk for me at London Climate Action Week about this blog post. I went, sure, fine. And some people came. We did a 3-hour conversation off the back of that. And then we said, oh, we should do more of those. So we went back to the RSA for an event called Questions About Questions with various other people who had regenerative thoughts, questions, whatever else. And from there, we built a regenerative design field kit. Again, it's just a pack full of questions, just poking and prodding and going, how do we get people to imagine being above that line in different circumstances? We started something called the Steps Collective, which meets every month and then does some in-person adventures, field trips, whatever else, and so on. And STEP stands for Show People the Easy Place to Start. Another thing we've bumped into over these last 2 years is that I think collectively we can't run the risk for regeneration becoming as technocratic and bureaucratic as sustainability has become, and just become endless ticking boxes and looking at numbers and so on. You have to show people stories of people who are trying this for themselves so they can go, well, I don't do that, but I can copy something in your intent. I can copy something in your direction that applies to my field, to my company, whatever else. But then I too can share that with others. And then cue the invitation to your 2040 to talk about some of this stuff in the summer. I'm going to pause there, Janelle, for questions.
Thank you, John. You know, I like seeing you talk. It always makes me think. And you're one of maybe the only person I've seen combine foresight and regeneration and kind of pathways into one. So I'm always impressed. And I think one of my favorite quotes that you just said was, regeneration can't be as technocratic and bureaucratic as sustainability. And I forget this sometimes.
It's
But
I think that's important because it's sort of like, especially. So funnily enough, I was having a conversation about another project in a different framework and different model with someone today, and we're doing I was just doing a kind of like the kind of like 2 years later research for a chapter in a design book we're writing, and we came to this place where we sort of like we really appreciated the fuzziness of the framework rather than the precision of a model. And it was kind of like sort of like actually it's just like the fuzziness of a framework allows people to have a conversation about the important things that need to be done, rather than the precision of the model starts being an arbitration over whether the figure is this or that. And it feels like sort of like the definition between framework and model is quite important in this space, and sort of like the more we can do to keep it fuzzy might be a valuable thing.
So I have a question to get us started, and then there's one in the chat, and we'll hand it over to you all so you have a few minutes to think. But you mentioned your background was not in sustainability, or at
No.
least that's how I interpreted it.
Yep.
What made you, how did you stumble upon this topic, or what made you interested in it?
So, my background's kind of weird. The rapid fire version is that I went to uni to do English, came out having done economics and econometrics, then went into market research, then went into media planning, then went into innovation, then started Smithery, and it was the UNDP stuff of just being put in an environment where people are collecting signals of change. Where working with UNDP is kind of like, I guess for anyone who's lucky enough to do it, it's kind of like transformational, because every room you walk into, it's like everyone's sitting with a double PhD, and you go, oh, this is quite scary, and so on. So you have to make sure you're on the game. But I just became very conscious that there were so many things that people were picking up in the world, which you go, right, I need to apply myself to some of these things, and hence bumping into that the regenerative word around that time, 2022, 23. And I think it's particularly, it nagged at me a lot during the project because of the kind of like the very idea of sustainable development goals as being this big thing, and the kind of like also the lack of success in achieving a great many of them, because of, he points outside at the one window and looks around at the world, right? It's kind of like you go, that interested me as a hooker, sort of like people going, we need to move beyond sustainability towards regeneration. You go, well, I'm not entirely sure we've done a terrific job in sustainability. So
That's fair. And thank you for sharing. I'm going to turn, Bruce asked a really exciting, or I think cool question in the chat. So I'll just read that. And then Bruce, if you want to jump in, feel free. But said, where do you, so in the regenerative triangulation metric model? Wait, no,
yeah.
framework.
Framework. Let's go framework for now.
Framework.
Yeah.
Where would you place circularity and or donut economic?
Oh, interesting question. So, donut economics specifically is great because it has that entangled, and we might talk about some of this later, but it has that entangled social, economic, environmental stuff. And part of, I realize that sort of like regenerative triangulation is the framework that got me into the other things like the Steps Collective and the regenerative design field work and whatever else. And I now feel like I'm coming back to it and going with 2 years more context to start considering that. To the donut economics point, it's like, how do you map where we are in Horizon 1 and how do you map where we want to be in Horizon 3 using all of those different considerations? Because even in Bill Reed and Genesis' original work, they're talking about sort of like this is a whole system measure. So depending whether you're below or above the line, there's a really interesting tension here for me to go sort of like the more of these different things we consider and measure and mark, do we drift more towards the sustainability problems we bumped into before, where it becomes about sort of like pushing around at little numbers and trying things? Or are there entangled ways of using this stuff to go, this is where I am by this measure, so therefore we can simplify and we can think about the payoffs between the three major forces. Circularity is, so funnily enough, I saw a presentation from someone at Donut Economics Action Lab last week at Thinkers 50 in London. And they had a really nice model. I'll try and share it in the notes afterwards and find it. But they had a really nice model. Sort of that some of this is circularity and some of this can't be just because we use the things as they come. All of this is to say, I think it's the stuff that makes it sort of like this framework is wholly context dependent, and it sits at a level above or an initial introduction to any of the kind of like precision in these kind of like, because like donut economics to me feels like a model, which is a good thing because it's like people doing the hard work to go and sort of like, let's get specific. Whereas this feels like it's almost, when I was thinking about it today and yesterday, I'm going sort of like this is just a thing to get a conversation started with a group, a team, a company, whatever else, and go sort of like, where do we think we are? And it might be as simple as having a paper version of it and going, I reckon all of our activities are down there, but it should be up here. I think I like that form of work because it starts a conversation and moving in the right direction without getting lost in the detail. So you can still have this global picture of what you're trying to do without getting caught in all of that kind of like. I've had, having done economics and econometrics, I'm very aware of the kind of like the lack of data around all of the different things that people try and make economics do.
Yeah.
I hope that was some sort of answer, Bruce.
Bruce, what'd you think?
Well, it's a really difficult question. So when you speak about econometrics, my background is in the digital economy specifically. So we have a huge tension in this sector right now because the advent of AI is testing the limits on electrification,
Mm,
particularly at the data center level, power availability, also water availability. This is a highly unsustainable situation. And here I am entering into the fray saying, now is exactly the time for the data center sector to take on regenerativity. And I agree with your principal point, though I've been holding it in my head as if regenerativity is the next stage after circularity. And of course it isn't. It's part of it. You can look at it that way, but you can be regenerative in 10,000 ways inside of any organization, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things I hope to foster is helping this sector understand that anything they do on the regenerativity side plays back to ultimate sustainability.
Mm.
It contributes to it.
Mm.
So uh, I know it's a thorny area for people to conceive, but if you take a corporation like Microsoft, they have what they call their circular centers. They've taken their hyperscale cloud data centers, and now they are a full circular economy to 92.7 or 8% of all material and product inside of a cloud data center. And if people aren't familiar with uh, this phenomena of what AI is doing, this is more significant than anything that has happened previously in the entire industrial global economy.
I looked at a little of the Microsoft stuff earlier in the summer just because someone challenged me on and I'm quite I don't know. I've been looking at the AI stuff since like 2017, 18, obviously like only the LLM stuff more recently. And someone said, "Well, what sort of LLM would you like to use?" And so I just started exploring the concept from a kind of like, well, what would a regenerative LLM company look like? And I think it's a really interesting point because it brings us back round to that consideration of, do we always have to hold social and economic and environmental regeneration together
Mm.
for something to be truly regenerative? Because I think you can be environmentally regenerative like an AI data center in the direction that Microsoft are taking, yet the data they use to train LLMs is wholly extractive socially. So I don't feel there is anything socially regenerative about the current state of the art of essentially just stealing data from everywhere and just using it as an excuse to go, but we got to train the model somehow. I'd like people to be sort of like holding all three of sort of like, how do we bring this data together in a socially regenerative way? How do we make it economically regenerative? Because we start growing the sorts of companies that benefit all in society, but also we do it in an environmentally friendly way. And if the regenerative triangulation framework has taught me anything, it's sort of like these questions are really hard, but that's not meaning we shouldn't ask them. Actually, holding these three things together as a challenge, we should rise up to meet it rather than run away from it and just go, well, we can't do the social thing. You go, "Oh, well, we can just think harder about it. We can find ways to do it."
That seems to be one of the challenges is when it gets hard. The innovators come and they find solutions, but lots of other folks, it's a time to kind of let it go and focus on like, let's do the easy wins, which is maybe why we've wound up with sustainability.
Yeah.
But there's one other question in the chat, and we'll maybe address that and then hand back to you, John. But Stin was asking, how do you deal with uncertainty? I don't know if you can
Ah,
elaborate more on
uh,
that.
the and it's the sort of like, yeah, it's the separation of uncertainty from risk of just going, we don't
Maybe I
know.
can help you there,
Yeah,
John.
please, please, please.
Yeah, because I mean it's a model, it's very fixed, and if I think about innovation, you think about innovation funnels. Things become more uncertain in the future.
Hmm.
So I would say, I'm not a favor of sustainability in the way that we're trying to sustain something, yeah, and to sustain means we're holding on to it and keep it fixed, yeah.
Yeah.
Whilst the regenerative approach is almost dealing with a changing circumstances.
Yes.
And what I feel I didn't see in your model is how would you visualize or how would you see these changing circumstances next to being regenerative, bringing back, the better, so improving things. So
So
that's why
that's
I put that question in. Yeah.
Okay, got you. So this is really interesting because it's almost sort of like it's a, maybe I should bring it up. Hang on. Let's find a version of it. In fact, let's go to.
Just saying you're not sharing the screen yet.
Yeah, I was just moving slides around to go to this version and so on. So this is it's static. And actually we're here and none of this exists or ever will. Because to your point about uncertainty, as soon as we step into this space, things that we didn't think were going to happen or didn't have an idea of start happening and so on. So, and this is a model for another day, but I've got a model of kind of like assemblage space, which takes the future cone and thinks about the past as well, where you're going, you always have the preposterous stuff, as Voros puts it, that you go, I didn't see it coming at the time, but then it started arriving, and you go, oh, this is actually has happened. So that uncertainty always moves. I think this is why my natural inclination with this as a framework is to go sort of like, okay, I want to get to a space where we're imagining in this horizon here. To do that, we need to have a vision for what that might be and an idea of where we're ending up if we keep doing what we're doing. But actually, the most important circle is that. What's the next thing we're going to do instead of that? Because then this, it's almost like you need the moving version where you go, and then we get to there and we do this exercise again, or we update, or we just sort of like go, look, what are the things that are emerging? This is not a we are defining exactly where we're going and exactly what the measurements are and so on, etc. But you're going, I want a company to get to there rather than there. I want them just to sort of look, because the more we can start moving the needle for as many different organizations as we can, the more we have a chance of going, it's not going to be one mighty leap, we're going to solve it. If more people step up and get above that line in whatever it is they're doing, if you're an HR team, if you're a product development team, if you're in a sales team, etc., and you just go, oh, I can see a way in which that if there was this hypothetical future, we'd start doing that now. I'm just going to start doing that now anyway. It feels like that's the sort of like the it's a model that provokes just that quick action rather than worrying about the things that I can't know about out here, because almost I'm not we're not saying that this is going to happen either. So it's almost the sort of like it's about the decision making now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's more clear to me. I mean, so regenerative is like a space which is in motion, and it's a way to achieve those set points and actions that you could retrieve from pulling it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, John, you had this is a good time to transition into part two.
Okay.
A bit of an engagement session for you all.
This is and this so this is an open question. This is all I've come back to this model. After 2 years of running around and doing things, and just like thinking about the space. And I realized that just in speaking to other people about the model over the last few weeks as well, I'm going, I want to get a handle on this y-axis a little, just to go, how does this encapsulate that entanglement that I'm talking about, the social and the environmental and the economic? And so I've just been initially kind of like looking back into the kind of like the Regenesis work of sort of like where they're going, well, up here is where regenerative design generates designs to regenerate rather than deplete underlying life support systems and resources within sociological holes. So they are saying it is meant to be all these things, but part of me then goes, well, how do you give people a way for working out what they're planning on doing and where it lands on this framework? It's sort of like, how do you pay off, or how do you weigh up sort of like it isn't economically regenerative, but is it as environmentally and as socially and so on? How do you start getting into a kind of like, how do we hold these three forces and embrace that entanglement for ourselves? So I thought, how have I ever done that before? How have other people done that? And then I offer it up to you folks to go sort of like how in your work and your lives have you seen yourself or organizations dealing with three forces at the same time? So one way I've thought about it is like entangled language. I love this from the Eames, the best for the most for the least. Just as a way of sort of like taking three dynamic forces and sort of like going, this is what we're trying to achieve as a goal. So actually, on the back of the regenerative design field kit originally, and still now, I put, how do you rise to the challenge of creating the healthiest environment with the greatest economy for all in society? So is it enough just to have a lingual entanglement where you're going, I need a way to hold all these three things present for myself at the same time? Then at the other hand of the scale, and like this is only something I started digging into last week, but I went, oh, that's a thing. So there's this thing called Shapley values, which talks about if you have multiple players, how do you think of it in a cooperative game where you get synergy bonuses? And there are problems with Shapley value and so on, especially when you get to too many players within a system. But I started just poking at the idea of going, if you treated economic and social and environmental as the players to align behind, are there ways in which you can say, I can see the entangled structure of cooperation, and if I can find a way to move up through these different layers, can I create cooperative games to move the three players closer to these different things? As I say, that line of thinking is a week old and not very good yet, but I think it's just an example of different ways that we might embrace the entanglement of those three things. So I open this out to the floor just to talk about sort of like, how do you, if you have more regenerative experience than I do, which is likely, hold these economic and environmental and social regenerative forces together in your head and your hands at the same time? Or equally, can you think of other places where you hold three perspectives with equal weight, where you've always got those multiple factors that you consider? Because my gut feeling is for something to be regenerative, it should be improving all three. It's maybe not good enough to hold a two and improve one. But anyway, over to you, if that's a if that invitation speaks to you, please.
So just a note, we're sort of running this, it's like a workshop. So feel free to either unmute, raise your hand, chime in, open discussion.
Simon.
Also, hello.
Hello, hi, hey. Thank you so much for the session, for the organization, and John for this really interesting um, work and also for the field kit. I was just wondering if this split into the three layers could maybe distract us from the underlying unity of life friendliness. Like, so I'm thinking about, prana in yogic kind of like history, or like when you look at the ecosystem, then often the nutrients in a mycelium, right, they're valuable. Like, I guess probably valuable and environmentally, they're valuable, I guess, economically to the mycelium, or like to the different species that are connected. Um, so I do wonder a bit, like, especially about the economic dimension, which we often measure, with the traditional metrics, if that maybe can distract us a little bit, and then we suddenly have to think about three spheres, which actually, in the end, are just united by life friendliness and life force. So this is a bit theoretical, but I wonder if this split could distract us. And thinking specifically about one project, we are building a community quite similar to the steps actually in Zurich.
Oh, cool.
It meets monthly, and I was thinking, okay, well, on the surface there's nothing economic about it. Then it kind of gives nutrients, so it shares information, it shares opportunities among people, like just like here as well, obviously. So we can also take your 2040 as an example. Wouldn't it be regenerative on many levels, like in terms of health of the people, in terms of business opportunities, even though you couldn't measure it in GPT, sorry, gross domestic product, it could still be life friendly, no? And that maybe brings us back to the union among these three dimensions of like what is nutritious.
It's really interesting. And I think this is to the point of the kind of like regenesis work as well. You can't really separate these things because they're all entangled. And actually, maybe it's sort of like maybe it prevents you, especially to your point on the kind of like and I'd almost use the word financialization of the economics, because and economics has, in a way, a lot of economics has devolved into the financialization, away from the kind of like the core meaning of sort of like creating a good and steady home for the all residents, all members of the family, all members of the country, whatever it happens to be. So there's sort of like there is something in that not trying to separate, which really speaks to me. And then every so often I bump into occasions where you go sort of like someone go, oh, we're doing this regenerative thing, and you're going, how is it socially regenerative? So how is it creating a way of communicating and living together and supporting each other, especially in kind of like aspects of health, that means that more of this activity will happen. So the sort of like maybe it's just sort of like being present enough to kind of like separate it to ask the question before folding it back in. So for instance, I was telling Janelle about this the other day, and we run a little nature watch community here on the estate, which is essentially, as the name suggests, it's sort of like, have you seen any nature around this estate? What have you seen? Share a picture of it, and so on and so forth. When I see pictures of this little community, you go, huh, what brings you lot together? And you go, nature is the thing. So like this, like environmental regeneration is the thing that we are thinking about. How do we rewild gardens, look after green spaces, and so on, etc. But the more I start asking the social regeneration question, becomes about sort of like, well, now actually sort of like some of the older residents on the estate have someone younger to talk to, and people to help them do other things, and ways to sort of like ask them help. And it's like it's no longer just about the environmental regeneration. It might not be environmental at all, the questions they ask, but we've made a social connection, and then more of those social connections will continue and thrive with these things together. So yeah, I mean, I have no answers, but I really, and maybe it is a kind of a constant zooming in and zooming out between the sort of like dimensions, and maybe we should zoom further down into the dimensions of social as well, so that you say sort of like, what kind of social regeneration? Is it health? Is it familial connections? Is it neighborliness? Is it sort of like, do we keep diving down to really pick apart where and how we can sort of like intervene and be social?
Cool. Thank you. It's complex. That's what we've learned.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a thought, question? Do you know anywhere you can hold all three of these in, I don't know, work, life? Okay. Maybe everyone's either racking their brains or doesn't know anywhere that we also operate this way. I can't think of one either, so.
It's the our education systems and everything works. It's kind of like, it's either this or that. So you have 2 points on a line, and then it's either this or it's that. And so we kind of like, oh, hello. I'm sorry, the dog's just barked to get in, so we're gonna have to let the dog in. Come on then.
Yeah.
Maybe she's thought of something. Have you thought of something, Bramble? No. No.
I do often, having a dog makes you think that, or at least makes me think, they see a lot of things that we can't see, And
Yes,
I feel
exactly.
like they can balance more in many ways.
I never usually do calls with dogs, but sorry. So
Okay.
we're very binary. So therefore trying to think in three dimensions about these things. And again, I was having a conversation with someone about an XY model framework, etc., and so on. And we both agreed as soon as you put the Z into those models, the percent of our ability to see what's going on disappears weirdly. It becomes really hard for not just you to think about it, but you to explain it to someone else. Um, but again, the leaning into this rather than the running from it. Oh, we've made it too hard by bringing these three things together, and you go, "Ah, we have." But maybe this is the sort of like the challenge we have to rise to. It's kind of like, where do we have these three entangled forces pulling in different directions? You to a better solution, not even solution, a better way of working or approaching something.
Yeah.
Um,
Something on kind of what Simon mentioned with mycelium. I think one of
mhm.
my hopes is like as we continue to understand what it is and how it functions on Earth, we'll find pathways forward for regeneration and maybe something beyond that that's better. I don't know. But I hope that, one of the things is as we continue to better understand the planet, it gives us insights too into how we.
Yeah.
Bruce, you very kindly put your hand up. Over to you.
I did. I think we're thinking too hard about trying to make the three elements of ESG plus economics meld. My experience in regenerative agriculture has proven, or to me it has, that when you take on a regenerative process, it becomes very social. The value is it's a direct connection with something almost primal for people in the mind. Most people have just never been asked to address it, right? In a linear economy, it never occurs to anybody to initiate something that is regenerative so that you can see the almost instant emotional behavioral appeal of it on a social basis. So I think I think it's almost, and I think that was a very wise choice of words rather than model. I think if the frameworks themselves can embody the social, the economic, and the governance aspects without trying to separate them out and say, well, this is for people, or this is for corn, or this is right. It's a holistic thing. I don't know what other word to use, but it's a paradigm where regenerativity is automatically emotionally. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's something in our DNA, I think. It's very tribal. It goes way back in history.
There's
And it's only in our modern we have and corporate economy that we have wandered so far afield from that.
that
Well said.
that really speaks to me, Bruce. One, because of kind of like the other examples I've seen, stepping up to go. That's it. We are so close to nature. Whether we kind of let that you just give people a little bit of permission to go to lean into it, and they just go for it. And it's sort of like, and everyone has different sort of specific bits of nature that they care more and less about. But I don't think I've ever met anyone who has absolutely no connection to the bigger natural world around them in some way. To
Yeah.
your to your point about the word thing, and you said I've got no other word to describe this rather than the thing. So I'm a massive fan of Bruno Latour's exploration of the word thing from the Proto-Germanic ding, which essentially meant assembly. And he sort of like he articulated sort of like so a thing is a complex assembly of contradictory issues, both social and material. A complex assembly of contradictory issues. So when you say thing, of course it's a thing. And we all know what we mean by things. You go, oh, we need to do a thing. But it conveys all of that stuff that is that beautiful entanglement. Mary.
Chris, you're next.
Sorry, Chris.
All right.
Am I a bit louder? Is that better? Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks everyone else as well for their contribution. I definitely didn't have anything to say at the start of this, and then I think after sort of Simon's point and Bruce's point as well, it made me think. I work in education, and one of the things I'm really interested in is kind of different ways of knowing things, and so we can know something scientifically, we can know something emotionally, we can kind of engage with different forms of knowledge and different understandings. And I think that was some of the thoughts that were kind of bubbling up for me, was that, you know, you can know a tree scientifically, you can understand the processes and the chemical elements of it, you can know it relationally, you can feel something for that tree, and you can have a kind of deep personal connection to something. You can know it in a kind of cultural way, it can have a cultural significance, or it can have story. And also some of those things can be in conflict at the same time. You can kind of know things that don't sit well with other forms of knowledge that you hold. And so I think for me that was something that was coming up about, you know, can you know something socially, and you can know something economically, and you can know something environmentally, and you can hold all of those knowledges sort of situated together, and where they align, it's a deeper form of knowledge, because it kind of pulls them and feels right, because they are aligning. And I think, you know, what you're saying about true regeneration meeting all of those three things is where we get that just of knowing that it's sort of true to all of those elements.
So this ventures straight into another territory I'm an absolute inexpert at, which is that the quantum physics realm of relationality, that everything is only defined by its relations to everything else. And actually, as a way of going, so to know something regeneratively, you have to know of all of those relationships it has with all of these different dimensions in order to truly know it. Yeah, that's an awesome thought, Mary.
It's collective. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And then over to Chris, and you will be our last caller.
Hi, everybody. I'm really so sorry I came in so late. I've been teaching a class today, and we got to take a tour of the airport in Zurich. So it was quite fascinating behind the scenes tour to stand on the tarmac and watch the birds come and go. So, John, I'm in hearing Mary, your comment, and Simon, I'm very triply sorry. I'm not hearing it, but I'm looking forward to catching up with you know in the middle of this all. You're talking about being close to nature. I was just in Cairo a few weeks ago, and the thing that struck me about Cairo, besides being a city of dozens of millions of people, was the lack of nature within the cities. Absolute dearth of nature, partly because Cairo is in the junction of a desert, but also because many of the trees have been cut down to make rain. But the city's so packed and dense that there's little nature to be found. So I was just thinking, as you said, everyone wants or has the opportunity to be close to nature. How have you thought about those millions who don't have the access to nature you enjoy? I enjoy that most everyone on this call have the privilege of enjoying. Over to you.
Yeah. Last question, 2 minutes to solve that. I have no idea, but feel that that's the sort of question that we need to ask of this work, that goes sort of like, if we consider it important, if we consider it as much of a human right as any of the others, how might you make provision of it, and what are the benefits of doing that for more than just the humans themselves? Because I think it's sort of like, if we start just making decisions, then we sort of like, we enter another cycle of sort of like doing something that we might regret. But so how do we sort of like, yeah.
I like John. I'm going to take the first part of your answer more seriously than the second. And I think this is something I would love for us as a community to kind of think about. And the takeaway is a question for us, taking our hearts and our heads, and another call, see if we can't think about this, because I think this is one of the groups. As we look at regeneration, as you do and I do, and so everyone on the call, is a deep-seated belief that this is the way forward. How can that be spread into and with those millions who... So thank you for the beautiful answer. I do appreciate that very much.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. And with that, we are just at time. So just a couple short announcements. Our next community call is going to be on the 9th of December, which I assume you all found us there. If not, it's on the website and all the other places. So I hope we can see you then. Our podcast, if you don't listen to it, it's called Choosing to Matter. We've just launched on all platforms. So previously we were only on Spotify. And last is publications. The last month we produced 6 different publications on different forms of kind of the future of countries, cities, and tools to help you think about the future. Also all currently free and available on the website. And so with that, I'd like to say a great big thank you to John. Really appreciate whenever I talk to you and learn more about regeneration and how you're thinking. You have a great brain, and thank you for sharing it.
No, thank you so much for the invitation today to join you in Switzerland over the summer. It's kind of like, you know, every time we connect, it moves me, but it moves my thinking on many more directions. So thank you.
Very glad. Thank you very much. And thanks to our team, Emily, who's not here, Kenny, Chris, for anyone who doesn't know him, he also works with us. And to all of you for joining us. We do these that you come and engage. And if you have any thoughts also, or want to talk in a future call, please reach out. And yeah, and with that, have a great night or day or morning, wherever you are in the world.
And I will put the slides up on a blog post, but then your 2040 guys will send that out on the email and stuff. So
yes,
that will be available.
And then we'll share this video too. So thanks for the reminder, John.